A Chinese open-weight model hit number 1 for front-end coding, matched frontier reasoning scores, and measured about half the cost of Claude Opus 4.8 on one task suite. Now Washington is discussing how to contain it. The first signal was human preference. Kimi K3 reached 1,679 ELO and number 1 on Arena's front-end code leaderboard, a 17-place jump from Kimi K2.6 and a lead over proprietary rivals at that snapshot. But the leaderboard is only the hook. The real story is the collision of three forces: frontier-level capability, lower measured task cost, and downloadable weights that are much harder to control than a hosted API. Moonshot introduced Kimi K3 on 16th July. On 27th July, it released the full model weights, technical report, and Kimi K3 license, turning an API launch into an artifact researchers and infrastructure teams can inspect. The headline number is 2.8 trillion parameters. But K3 is a sparse mixture of experts model. The full network exists in the weights, while roughly 104 billion parameters are activated for each token. Its rather selects 16 experts from a pool of 896 for each token. That extreme sparsity is how Moonshot can scale the model's capacity without activating every parameter on every step. Moonshot reports 93.5% on GPQA Diamond at maximum reasoning effort. It is now in the model card, but should still be described as the vendor's evaluation until broader replication arrives. The first minute proof stack is 4 signals: 1,679 front-end ELO, 93.5 on GPQA Diamond, 94 cents per measured task and downloadable weights. Strong evidence, but 4 different measurements, not one universal score. Vercel CEO Guillermo Rauch added a practical signal. Kimi K3 led the Next.js engineering eval, matching a 92% success rate while finishing faster than comparable top proprietary runs in that published snapshot. That does not make K3 the best model at every job. Frontend Arena measures human preference, Next.js evals test one framework, and GPQA tests hard science questions. Each result answers a different question. Artificial analysis measured K3 at about 94 cents per task versus $1.80 for Claude Opus 4.8 on its knowledge work evaluation. That is roughly half the cost there, not a guarantee for your production workload. The API list price tells another story. $3 per million uncached input tokens, $15 per million output, and 30 cents per million cached input. Workload shape decides whether K3 is cheaper. The 90% number applies to cached versus uncached input, not the whole app bill. Output tokens, agent loops, retries, and tool calls still count. Measure a representative task before writing the headline. The 27th July release changes the debate. Teams can now inspect the checkpoint, test independent service tags, and deploy under the Kimi K3 license instead of relying only on Moonshot's hosted endpoint. Open does not mean easy to run. A 2.8 trillion parameter checkpoint, expert routing, memory traffic, and distributed inference put K3 firmly in cluster territory. Most teams will still consume it through a provider. OpenWeight is not a fully reproducible open source training stack. You receive weights and a license, but deployment, data provenance, safety testing, and operating costs remain your responsibility. A coding score is model plus harness. Moonshot used Kimi code for several tests, Claude code for others, and Codex-backed OpenAI results. Prompts, tools, retries, and context policy can move the score. For your evaluation, log the task set, agent harness, tool budget, and acceptance checks. Run each model 3 times. Then compare success, latency, tokens, and total cost. Not the prettiest demo. K3 also landed inside a wider semiconductor sell-off. Nvidia, AMD, Intel, and other chip names fell as investors questioned AI infrastructure returns. K3 amplified that narrative, but it was not the market's only cause. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said Chinese AI firms could face sanctions if US reviews find IP theft. That is a warning and allegation, not a published finding that Kimi K3 violated the law. Semafor reported that officials have limited tools to prevent model distillation without a technical solution. Once weights circulate, enforcement becomes even harder. An API can be blocked but copied files can travel. Reuters cited a congressional report saying some estimates put Chinese open model use near 80% of US AI startups. Treat that as directional, not a census, but adoption is part of the policy pressure. Axios reported that parts of the Trump administration revived discussion of restrictions on cutting-edge Chinese models after K3's rise. No blanket ban had been announced. That distinction matters for deployment. Options reportedly included Commerce Entity List action, an NSA or cyber advisory, hosting liability rules, and draft supply chain restrictions. These were proposals, not finalized rulebook. A de facto ban would likely be slower and more durable. Procurement limits, entity list threats, security advisories, and pressure on US hosts. For builders, policy risk can arrive before any headline law. RCAI offered a counterpoint. When a company runs open weights in its own environment, the model creator has no automatic access to that deployment. That risk differs from sending data to a foreign API. Separate three questions: where prompts travel, what the weights can do, and who operates the stack. Hosted API, model behavior, and self-hosting need different controls, not one risk label. Most teams have three routes: Moonshot's API for speed, a domestic inference provider for ease of procurement, or self-hosting for control. The answer depends on data sensitivity, scale, and policy exposure. Start in shadow mode. Send a safe copy of representative tasks to K3. Score the outputs, log latency and total cost, then route only the workloads it wins. Keep a closed model fallback for failures and high-risk cases. If you adopt K3, pin the checkpoint and provider log routes, keep regression fixtures, review the license, document data residency, and maintain an exit plan. Cheap intelligence matters only when it is replaceable. Kimi K3 is not a universal winner or 90% cheaper across every app. It is more important, an open weight model close enough to the frontier to force new pricing, deployment, and policy decisions. Do not switch your stack from one leaderboard. Pick one expensive workflow, run the same fixture on K3 and your current model, then publish quality, latency, and cost. The model war matters when your evidence is local.